The Broad Street Review podcast is an extension of Broad Street Review, Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation, an online arts and culture journal covering the greater Philadelphia area. This podcast is an Emory production. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Podcast, Cat Ramirez and Daniel Park drop by to talk about space opera, a role-playing theatrical spectacle taking place over several days from Obvious Agency. Here is my interview with Cat and Daniel for Space Opera. And welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Today, I'm in the virtual studio to talk with Obvious Agency about an upcoming event, engagement, production called Space Opera. And there's just so many elements about this that are very exciting, as we're going to get into. And we're also just going to learn about Obvious Agency. It's the first time I've had a chat with the Obvious Agency. We have two guests in today, and we will start with Cat with introductions.
Hi, my name is Cat Ramirez. I use they, he, she pronouns. I am a worker owner and the cooperative operations manager with Obvious Agency, and I also am the director and the lead producer for Space Opera.
Okay. And
Hey. My name is Daniel Park. You can use he and him pronouns for me today, Darnell. I am a worker owner with Obvious Agency as well. I'm the cooperative business manager, so I focus on all of our fee-for-service programs at Obvious Agency. I was previously the lead artist for Space Opera, and now have stepped back from that role, and I'm just one of the game designers on the project as well.
You're also the game master, one of the game masters.
Yes, that is true. In performance, I am one of the two co-game masters as well. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to role-playing games, I have always hovered around the role-playing gamers, and I've never been at the table. I've been looking at it going, what are you doing? What is this? I can't pull myself away, but I'm not participating. I'm like a spectator. So I've always been interested in these types of games. And all of my friends are into these games, very much in it. It's so ridiculous that I'm not a part of them. But that's why I was definitely interested to talk about this. But first, tell us a little bit about Obvious Agency.
Yeah, I can jump in. So Obvious Agency, we have been around and working together since around 2016 or 2017 was our first project. Joe Ahmed and Ari Gass were sort of the two other folks who sort of helped start the company in its infancy alongside me. And we all kind of got together in part just because we were really interested in the intersection between game design and live performance for a bunch of different reasons across the three of us. We actually got to start working on a project together originally called the Diamond Eye Conspiracy. And that Ari was working at the entrepreneurial game studio at Drexel University at the time. And we got commissioned to create a project for Temple Library's big festival that year that was focusing on games. And so we made this immersive, site-specific piece of playable theater inside the Paley Library at Temple University that was very broadly sort of themed around how unaffordable college is just generally, was pulling from some history of the library itself. And so the sort of plot or story was that there was this secret organization that was taking advantage of all of these students, right, who were struggling to afford college and saying, hey, we can help you out. Underneath the libraries of all of these universities all across the country, there are diamonds hidden underneath them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dig them up. And so a student goes missing, and basically these two characters that were played by Joe and myself recruit these strangers from the internet basically to search through the library to try to find these other missing students. artists. So that's kind of how we got our start together. And we were really inspired by the fact that like we could do this thing and maybe we could do it for a profit, right? This was a time when the idea of like gamification was getting really big. And so there were all of these organizations that were like exploring that. And, you know, there were brand activations and things like that. But partly it was just uh, we were really dissatisfied with kind of the economic outlook of theater and the arts at the time. And we were really curious, are there other ways for us to go about, you know, making money as a theater company that feels more equitable and supportive of artists? So, you know, that's a lot of like big falutin thoughts, but we were kind of just like big game nerds who also were big theater nerds. And we were like, this is way more fun than the more kind of passive consumer producer relationship that so much theater is. We liked something that was more active, a little bit more engaged. Yeah, and that's kind of where we got our start at the time. And then Kat joined us a few years later on, and it's been a dream ever since.
I think that's great. I've been saying, you know, on this side of the pandemic, that artists are going to be thinking differently about how they can be artists, and we're going to start to see theatrical groups that come together and produce like non-traditional theater, you know, but also like I feel like the I feel like theater as a community is sort of like resistant to the fact that there is all of this technological advancement that is also interesting to theater artists and just creatives in general. There are so many creatives that can and do lend their hands to theater already, and pulling a lot of that stuff together, I think, is going to be the way forward. So I'm really excited about Obvious Agency and how you know how you're looking at things, because all of this is fun. It's kind of like in the past where you would say like, okay, so you don't like musicals, but you go to concerts. You know, a concert is kind of a musical. It's got a lineup. There's storytelling. There's all kinds of there's performance to it. There's theatricality, and it's just showing people that there are theatrical elements to everything that they love, and allowing them to see it differently. It's kind of like finding another way to get into the house instead of just going through the front door.
Yeah, well, and I'll clarify too. For us, it's interesting because, you know, different forms of interactive technologies have been part of a lot of our pieces, actually, in a bunch of different ways. But for us, really, it was less so about the like video game side of game design, right? But really, for us, it was more about this idea of, you know, games are systems, right? Like whether we're talking about a video game, whether we're talking about a board game, whether we're talking about a sport, a card game, like what have you, right? The idea is that every player is bringing a unique input to that experience. And then on the other side, there's a unique output in the end, right? And so for us, it was really about this idea of how can we be creating these systems, right, that sort of have the spectacle of theater, that have the narrative of theater alongside them, but where folks can really come and experience, right? We call ourselves Obvious Agency because we want our work to make your agency obvious to you. We want you to come to a piece of ours and know that you were there and it mattered. Right. And so our work is really focusing on this idea of how can we help people explore agency in their own lives through all of these different lenses, through all of these different forms, right? So while the media part, or the media part, right, the digital media part is definitely part of it, using that technology is definitely part of it, and it's really fun to mess with that with space opera as well. It's really about this idea of like, how can we give people an opportunity to really feel like their experience, not just their experience, but their participation matters, what they're bringing to the experience matters. We're not asking them to just like sit in a dark room and watch us do our thing. We want to be doing it with them. We want to be co-creative with them.
Yeah, and I think with that, like I feel like one of the internal metrics we use to be like, is this an obvious agency piece? Is if we can run the show from start to finish without stopping and being like, oh no, we need an audience to make a decision in order to figure out the next part of that narrative. So like, for example, like if I was doing a show at Theater Exile, and God forbid no audience came, that'd be really, but the actors could get up on stage and run that play start to finish. For an obvious agency show, if nobody shows up to our show, we can't run the show start to finish. There are multiple points with which, the story cannot continue because we need player input in order to keep the narrative going. Which makes our teching a show wild. But I'm coming straight from this call from planning the rehearsal and tech process for space opera, and it's really like, wow, how do we practice this game that is really dependent on the player decisions before we get an audience coming in? Yeah,
interesting. That makes that's like giving a different thought to a preview. Or like a final dress. You really need the people in there to participate.
Yeah, we've had so I think often with game design you do something called play testing, where you test your game with audience several times, kind of another iteration of previews. So this project has been in development since 2021. We were saying so about 4 years, and we've probably had upwards of like 8 to 10 play tests, testing the game and testing the performance elements that we're going to be bringing really to life in June.
Great, cool. So now let's dig into space opera.
Right.
And the concept. So you just said 2021, right? You started development. I think it's always good to know when it starts, because I think there are a lot of people out there who want to create something, but they have this urgency, and they just. But you have to understand that things take time to like incubate, and you trial and error, and it grows, and you build on it. So good to know. It took some time to get here, but how did you know it was ready? We're at this. How did you know it was ready?
Do you want to jump in on this?
I'm like really curious. I was curious what you thought.
Yeah, I mean, ready. I don't know. I mean, so right, game design, like we're saying, is incredibly iterative. And even still, right, we're opening this thing in like 3 weeks. There are still places where even just in the core game design, I'm like, there are all of these little changes I want to make, right? And I think that that's true for almost any piece of art, right? Like, I think for a lot of artists, it's never really done. It's never really perfect. It's just like you put the thing up, you did the thing, it got published, it happened, right? And I feel really similarly to this, where I think like we, in terms of process, in terms of working on the thing, there's a lot of excitement, and there's also a little bit of like, oh man, there's a lot of exhaustion, right? Like we've been working on this thing for a really long time, and we kind of just need to get it out there in its first iteration, in sort of a first, full draft, quote unquote, we'll call it, to really see how does it land when you have all of these elements here. There are so many pieces to this thing, right? So it's this idea of like, is it ready? And it's like, well, kind of not, right? By which I mean, like, it's ready to share. It's there. It's going to be a great experience. And also there's always going to be so much more that we can like shift and move on it. And I think I was even talking to a collaborator. We were like doing tiny little copy edits on some of the playing cards that we use as part of the game today. And like we were just joking how like this could be endless. Like we could go on and make these little copy edits to make sure that the rules are clear, that the language is right, like just until the end of time, right? But there's a certain moment where it's like, we just got to bless and release and trust that like it's going to work. It's going to be okay. Like, and we need to put our time, our energy, our focus on something different. But part of what's really nice about the iterative process, about sharing the work as often as we do, is, for me at least, it allows the process to be just as much part of the art as the final product as well. Like, we've been able to hear from audience members that even work in progress showings of this thing are having the impact on them that, at least for me, I wanted the final product to have, right? So I think that's part of it, is like, as we're hearing from folks that we're sharing to work with over and over again, that like, yeah, it's making me think about this, or it's changing my life in X kind of way, or, you know, what have you. It's like, yeah, this is it. It's doing the thing already. It's just like, can we get it even better, even more clarified, even more distilled, that kind of thing.
Huh. Perhaps asking what's a piece ready is not the right question. Perhaps I should have said, how do you know you're ready?
Yes, exactly.
But as you were saying all that, I was thinking about how I have a video game on Steam that I got at early access, which means it's like they have a game. It's not at 1.0 yet, but here you go, and help us build it, really. And so, concept, the game is playable, just not on every device. There's enough there to know what's there, and even though it's not at that first version, I'm super excited about it because its bones are there. And so I think that about work in progress anyway. You know, being in at any level is great because seeing where it is today and knowing that you're not finished is exciting. Because then we'll look forward to it again to see how far you've come or what you've changed, what you've added, how it grew.
Yeah, and I can say on my end, because I think like the version we were looking at of space opera in like 2021, 2022, when we were doing our like first ever test versus where we're at now is wildly different. The rules themselves have changed. The rules of the game themselves have changed and iterated on many different times, but also the way in which we are combining theatrical practices with the game design itself has been iterated on like time and time and time and time again. And it's been really exciting, especially even in the last 2 weeks or so, where we have a lot of different project groups of all the artists who are involved in this project, kind of working and making a lot of decisions independently of one another. And we've started particularly with a group of our performers, as well as a group of people whose specific job is to think about how do we theatricalize the rules of this game. We've started looking back at some of our like 2022 workshops and are like, oh yeah, remember that time that we had all of our players like create a like entrance, like a like physical entrance for the society that they're playing, or moments where we've prompted audience to do things that, that we haven't. Yeah, I had just like forgot about little moments like that we're starting to like kind of bring back and weave in new ways. But I think for me, not last December, but the December prior, I think in like 2023, we did a more fully theatricalized playtest of the show that has a lot of the bones that we're basing this version in June off of. And I think after seeing that, and it had like a bit more of a built out lights and costume design, we had some props, a few things. I think after seeing that, I was like, oh yeah, we can put this up. It's a beast, but like we're going to be able to put this up and it's going to be more impactful than like I can imagine. We just did, which I'm stoked about. We just did a walkthrough with our entire team yesterday, where everybody has been reporting out on everything they've worked on, but we've finally been able to like share the full set design, share what the like sound, the original sounding composition sounds like, and there's something that feels so special about sharing a set design that not only your actors and performers are inhabiting, but also 40 players are going to be able to sit and like be inside this set They're going to get costume pieces. The sound is being made for them. They're going to move around in this world in the same way that an actor would in a traditional show. And there's, I don't know, there's just, it feels different knowing the way in which your art audience is not only going to be physically immersed in the piece, but also have agency over the story we're telling together.
That's great. That is pretty awesome. Thinking about earlier, we were talking about how you need the audience there, right? And so with that, knowing that, would space opera have versions in the future? You know, as this changes all the time, as you have players.
Would it be? I'm also realizing we haven't actually described what space opera is yet. Should we? Would it be useful for us to do that for a second first?
I have like nuts and bolts interest in this, and I'm weaving around to like, okay, so how do we participate? But yes.
Yeah, I mean, so just so folks
Let's
have
go
context.
back and then we'll answer that question. Okay,
Yeah.
so everybody, you're very excited about space opera. You've gotten all this background information. You still don't know what it is. You're waiting with anticipation as minute 20 of this interview goes by.
Yeah. So space opera, right? As we sort of talked around, it's a theatricalized tabletop role playing game designed for 40 to 60 people at a time, right? So tabletop role playing games, most people, right, are familiar with something like Dungeons and Dragons. That's like the big one that most folks know, right? Where generally the way it works in most tabletop role-playing games is that you're taking on the identity of some kind of character and you're going on epic adventures. And what most tabletop role-playing games tend to do, right, is when you try to take an action, when you try to do something that impacts the world in some kind of way and there's a chance of failure, you'll roll dice, and then the dice will tell you, okay, either you succeeded or you failed. And oftentimes you've got a game master who's sort of representing the rest of the world, the rest of the universe outside of whoever the player characters happen to be, right? So in space opera, we're doing things somewhat similarly, somewhat different. In space opera, folks are gathering in groups of about 8 people, and together in that group of 8, you're representing a far future sci-fi fantasy society of some sort. And within that, each individual player is playing as a community that is part of that society, right? There was that big moment where a lot of people were thinking about future visioning, right? We were going through a really heavy, hard period, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, during the uprisings, right? And there was this question of like, well, do we have a future? And what a lot of us were doing was, well, let's take a minute and just envision ourselves existing in that future as a way of affirming ourselves, right? Like, we do have a future, we will make it through. Space opera as a sci-fi fantasy piece is not a future visioning piece. It's actually very much asking us to look at today and this moment and ask ourselves, how are we organizing ourselves? How are we practicing democracy, right? As like infrastructural democracy in the US crumbles and fascism takes over, right? Like, what does democratic practice actually look like on the day-to-day in our homes, on our blocks, in our neighborhoods, and that kind of thing, right? So you're coming together, you're working in these groups, and you're trying to figure out how are these different societies relating and trying to move through this oncoming existential crisis that's going to be impacting them. And each day of gameplay, space opera takes place over the course of 3 full days. Each day of gameplay is a different generation across those 5 different player societies. So, you know, you're trying to decide, okay, how does our society want to respond to this crisis, right? And then we do still have dice rolls. Players are still taking actions. Like we said earlier, we have 2 co-GMs who are helping figure out, okay, how does the rest of the universe respond around all of this? But that's like a very high level kind of big picture of like what space opera is. And then, of course, Kat, I don't know if you want to talk about the theatrical elements of that and how the game responds to the stories that players are telling.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I just always love listening to you talk about space opera, Daniel. So as players are telling these stories, we've devised theatrical systems that are responding in real time to player decisions. So I think an example I can give is in that playtest I was talking about in 2023. We had folks who had to come to 2 sessions of gameplay. In the first session, a group of players made up an entire pop star named Vita, who performed essentially this like incredible Super Bowl halftime show with beautiful dancing, with backup dancers who had spray bottles of something that they were spraying on the audience. And the action that they wanted was to, I think, like appease the other communities that existed. And when they rolled, they only got a partial success. So the performance was good, but actually the spray bottles that sprayed on the audience got everyone like kind of wet and uncomfortable, and it was a bit of a like unwanted wet t-shirt contest. And we heard that description and kind of immediately were like, I think we need to bring this to life. So the way we started the next session of play is that we created entirely original live music, and we made up Vita, and we bought spray bottles, and we put on the entire performance that everybody had just described. And so we're really excited to kind of take these moments that players are able to imagine and bring them to life, even whether that's in like a very concrete way like that, or even through just like little design elements that are going to shift and change across gameplay. So I don't want to like give away a lot of the systems that we've built, but we're really planning the design from the play happens over 3 sessions, and you can join in just 1 session, or you can get a ticket to like play all 3. But we're really designing systems that that like our performers, our projection design, our sound, our lights, our set, our props are all able to react to the choices that players are making.
I just noticed that there's a witness ticket.
Yes. Yeah. So if you, the days of play, if you want to play, are from 12 to 7. So it's a 7-hour ticket that you're fed in between. There are rest areas. We really are thinking about like, what does your body need to play a game for 7 hours? But if you don't want to put 7 hours in, we do have a Galactic Witness ticket that is for 90-minute to 2-hour chunks, where you can come in and you can observe the people who are playing the game. And you'll also, again, I don't want to give everything away, but the observers will also have a hand in certain moments of gameplay. So they still will have an effect on the space.
I'm all over the place. Do you see this as something that could go to like PAX East?
We've talked about that. I mean, I have a desire for something like that. I mean, we're a worker-owned cooperative, and we try to go to the U.S. Federation of Worker-Owned Cooperatives conference every couple of years as well. So we've been thinking about like stuff like PAX East. We've been thinking about stuff like a pre-conference activity for organizers, right? Like organizers have been a big group of kind of who we've been thinking about space opera as like being for, right? An opportunity to think about organizing strategy outside of sort of the like crisis of this moment where we're so often on the back foot. We are currently in the process of applying to the Indiecade Festival. So yeah, we're definitely thinking about like all of these different spaces where the piece might be able to pop up and speak to folks, right, who we really are hoping the piece speaks to, who are part of the community that Obvious Agency exists for.
Have you thought about who the audience is for this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, really broadly with Obvious Agency, so much of our work, like, I think that we kind of embrace this idea of like, we're trying to make work for people like us. Actually, like, so much of particularly, right, how arts funding works is there's this weird sort of paternalistic white supremacist idea of like, oh, we need to help, underserved communities and da 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 da. And like, oftentimes what they're really trying to say is they're trying to say poor Black folks, right? Like, they won't say it outright, but that's broadly who they mean. And it's in this weird kind of like, oh, there's no culture there already idea, which we all know is not true, right? We're really clear on like, yeah, we're trying to make work for folks like us who have oftentimes felt excluded from traditional cultural experiences, right? And so that means queer folks, that means folks of color, that means workers, right? Other artists. Oh my God, other artists as part of the community. What a radical, weird idea, right? But and I think that with space opera in particular, we've been really clear that it's for like nerds of color, that it's for queer nerds, that it's for organizers, right? And it's really about giving those folks an opportunity to be in community with one another, to meet one another, to build new relationships with one another as well, right? Like, there's an element of like grassroots organizing in this. I keep thinking about this a lot recently, but like, as we are seeing so much of our public infrastructure crumbling around us, like, what we are going to need to rely on is our individual relationships with other people, right? And so there's just this goal, I think, for me with this piece of like, yeah, we want people who come and make new relationships that feel like they mean something to them.
So, so our listeners are excited about space opera tickets. So how do they do that?
Yeah, so if hello listeners, if you are excited about space opera and would like to buy a ticket, you can go to obvious-agency.com. And there is a link on our front page that will take you to our ticket page. After you get taken to that link on the ticket page, it'll describe all the different ways that you can engage with space opera. Like we were talking about, you can buy a ticket to play for all 3 episodes on June 14th, 21st, and 28th. You can also buy an individual player ticket where you can just play for a single episode on the 14th, 21st, and 28th. I'm just going to keep saying those dates. Or you can buy a galactic witness ticket. We have 3 witness slots per day that you can buy on June 14th, 21st, and 28th. All of those tickets are going to lead you to Arch Street Meeting House, which is in Old City and where the show is taking place. You can also walk up and buy a ticket if you would like.
I love these options because somebody may not want to be there. And so I love the idea of a witness ticket. That's so smart. And you can just play for one day if you want to. It's great. Great options. So it's not limiting. It doesn't lock people out of it. Great. Is there anything else about space opera that we should know before we sign off today?
I'm like, so much. We've been putting so much work into this. I think one thing I wanted to name, Darnell, you opened the podcast up talking about how like I've been surrounded by TTRPG and kind of like role-playing folks, but haven't quite gotten into it. And that was something I felt a lot personally. When I first started working on space opera, I think I had played like 3 or 4 rounds of D&D that Daniel was DMing for me, but hadn't gotten really into it. And I think something we've really, really intentionally built into the gameplay is to make playing TTRPGs an accessible thing for anybody. So often the experience when you're first playing D&D or something that is really rules dense, at least for me, is like, oh my God, I can't remember this 40-page booklet and therefore I am not good enough to play this game. And that is not the case for space opera. This is a game that can be played by anybody. If you are coming in and playing, every table has specifically a performer facilitator, and our performer facilitator team is amazing. It's Anthony Martinez Briggs, Jackie Soro, Joe Ahmed, Casey Legacion, Matthew Armstead, and Sam Rise. A really incredible, each table will have a performer facilitator who is there to walk you through the steps of gameplay. We've really mindfully thought out how we're going to be how we're disseminating rules to people so that it's happening in kind of controlled and bite-sized bits. But yeah, this piece is for folks who have been playing D&D for many, many years, but it's also for people who like maybe have been surrounded by some of those players and a little curious, but also a little intimidated, because we want people to experience this for like any level, really.
Great. And all the people that are involved in bringing this together is exciting too, because you're all just very much involved in our community, and I think this is such a great idea, and it's so exciting, and everybody should visit Obvious Agency, obvious-agency.com, or hyphen, not dash. agency.com, and find out more about space opera. Cat, Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to introduce us to Obvious Agency and unpack space opera. This is all very exciting, and it's coming up very soon. So if you're listening to this, you should click the link and listen to this and learn about it. There's a whole lot of great information about the journey that brought us to this point, and all the ticketing info, and how there are many ways for you to participate in this experience. So again, Kat and Daniel, thank you so much. It's been truly a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you to our guests, Cat Ramirez and Daniel Park, for joining us on today's podcast. The Broad Street Review podcast is an Emory production. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, visit us online at em3ry.com. Get involved with Broad Street Review. Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com to find out how. While you're there, help keep us running and click donate at the top. There you can also find our social media links. Thank you for your part in keeping the conversation going.